What's up? Today we're going to be looking into the French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763. So to provide some normally I would have some primary sources, some first-hand accounts and documentation from this time period for you guys, so we can cross-reference and analyze them. However, there's like nothing on this subject matter, so we're just gonna have to make do with what we got. Um, so the French and Indian War was the North American theater of the global conflict, or not really global, but the European conflict known as the Seven Years' War, which lasted from 1756 to 1763. Fought primarily between Great Britain and France. So this was part of the Anglo-French Wars, as we see in this last millennia. Um, Also fighting alongside them was their respective colonial and Native American allies, so their colonies and allied tribes. And the war reshaped the political map of North America and um, essentially laid the road for the later American Revolution. Although the British did declare victory and they won the war transformed imperial British politics. It devastated many native communities, bankrupted both the French and the English, which is why we have the American Revolution and the French Revolution. And it also intensified colonial resentment, primarily in the 13 colonies towards Great Britain. So next we have the we have the background and causes of the war. So there's the imperial rivalry in North America, and by the mid 1700s, Britain and France were competing for dominance across North America, as we see with New France and 13 colonies, Quebec, Louisiana, so on and so forth. And the Ohio River Valley, where these kind of this border between the French and the British. So the 13 colonies stretches along the Atlantic coast, and their population at this time has already exceeded 1.5 million. Pretty impressive. And their economy was strongly reliant on the agricultural sector. And the colonists were steadily pushing towards, as I said, into that Ohio River Valley area, westward towards the Pacific. And the French, they controlled a large part of Canada, Quebec, the Great Lakes region, the Mississippi River Valley, and the Louisiana Territory. So instead of dense settlement like the 13 colonies, the French relied on fur trading, military force, and alliance with the Native American tribes. So the French strategy created a vast but thinly populated empire, nowhere near as big as the 13 colonies. The Ohio River Valley dispute was the immediate cause of the war. So both Britain and France claimed the region because it's strategically important, rich in fur trade opportunities, which was a booming capital in Europe, and it was the key to westward expansion. Um, the French began constructing forts to secure the territory, alarming the British colonists and land speculators. The Virginian colonial government sent a militia officer, a young man named George Washington, and to challenge the French expansion. So this leads us on to the opening of the war. So George Washington and Fort Necessity. So this occurred in 1754. George Washington led the Virginian militia into the Ohio Valley. Um, Washington then ambushed a French scouting party led by the Joseph Coulon de Jumigny. I don't know if I'm saying that right. This skirmish was the spark that began the war. And so Fort Necessity was built by Washington, and it was surrounded by French and native forces. And he actually surrendered on July 3rd, 1754. This was one of the few military surrenders of Washington's career. So next, we're going to get into the Native American involvement in the war. So the Native American alliances, like, it's important because they controlled a lot of territory. They understood the terrain and the area, the landscape. They were able at conducting frontier warfare, obviously, and they also did have a big influence on trade routes. And both the French and the British heavily relied upon them. So the major native nations that were allied with France were the Hurons, the Algonquin, the Ottawa, and the Shawnee tribes. And France maintained this relationship with them because the French settlement was not as big of the initiative as it was for the British, and the fur trading partnerships were mutually beneficial. Allied with Britain, we see the Iroquois Confederacy, the Cherokee, and other colonial militias. The Iroquois attempted neutrality early, but increasingly leaned towards the British. So next we're going to go on to major campaigns and turning points. So key battles. 1755 is the Battle of Monongahela, where British General Braddock is terribly defeated. 1755 again, we see the Battle of Lake George, which is the British defense of New York, which was successful. From 1756 to 1757, we see the Fort Oswego campaign, and the French gain control of the Great Lakes, full control over the Great Lakes region. 1757, we see the siege of Fort William Henry. The French win. The Native Americans attacks after. Sorry, so the Native American attacks surrendering forces, which shocks the British colonies. And then 1758, we see the Battle of Louisbourg, where the British seize gateway into the St. Lawrence River. 1758 is the Battle of Fort Carillon, where the French repel larger British forces. 1758, again, we see the Battle of Fort Frontenac and Fort Duquesne, where Britain disrupts French supply lines, and the French ultimately abandon their forts, and the British establish Fort Pitt. And 1759 is the Battle of Quebec, which is a decisive British victory, consolidating their dominance in that region. Battle of St. Foy, 1760, a French tactical victory, but a strategic failure in the long run. And then the fall of Montreal in 1760 was the ultimate end of French colonial holdings in Quebec and Canada. And then 1763, Pontiac's rebellion begins, where the Native American resist after the British victory. So major figures in the war. George Washington, obviously. So at this time, he's a young Virginian officer. He gained some military experience, and then he learned the harsh lessons about command and logistics in the New World. And he later used his experience here in the American Revolution to fight the British soldiers who were normally used to fighting in the old world and not used to fighting in the New World. Next is William Pitt. He is a British political leader who transformed the war effort. He increased military spending, prioritized naval supremacy, which is why the British Navy has such a strong naval fleet. He coordinated global British strategy, not just in the New World, but in the Old World as well. And many historians often consider him the architect of the British victory in the French-Indian War. Next is General Edward Braddock. So he led the Monongahela campaign, and he symbolizes pretty much rigid European old-school military thinking, where think about the line formations and that sort of thing, not necessarily like this new frontier warfare where it's kind of more guerrilla-based. Next is James Wolfe. He is the commander who captured Quebec, and he became a British national hero after he passed away. Onto the French figures. So first we have Marquis de Montcalm. He is France's leading commander in Canada. He's known for his tactical brilliance, defensive strategy, and successful early campaigns. He died shortly after the Battle of Quebec. Next is Governor Vaudreuil. He was the Governor General of New France, and he often clashed with Montcalm over military strategy. Next is Louis Joseph de Saint Véran, also known as Montcalm, one of France's most capable military leaders during the war. Next, so why the British won? They, first of all, as mentioned earlier, they have a naval superiority. Britain's navy was able to successfully blockade French ports, cut off reinforcements, and they established dominance over the Atlantic supply lines. And this, obviously, a lack of supply really caused the French to struggle in Canada. Next was the population advantage. Since the British really vastly outnumbered New France, Britain was able to field larger armies with more militia and greater economic resources. Next is William Pitt's strategy. So he coordinated colonial cooperation, naval warfare, and global offenses. So this is like a new, like revised type of warfare that we haven't seen before, at least not since the War of Spanish Succession early on in the 1720s. The next was also the French supply problems. So Canada was depending on long transatlantic supply routes, and once this mounting British pressure from their naval forces intensified, France was not able to sustain the war effort. So as we come to the end of the war, in 1763 we have the Treaty of Paris, first of many. The terms of the treaty is that France loses Canada. They lose most of their territory east of the Mississippi River, and they lose their claims in mainland North America. Spain gains the Louisiana Territory from France. Britain gained Canada, Florida, and dominance in eastern North America. So France effectively stopped being a major colonial power in North America. Next is the consequences of the war. The war was catastrophic for the native peoples. After Britain won, settlers were constantly flooding westward. British officials provided less diplomatic support than the French, and the native autonomy was quickly and rapidly declining. Next is Britain's debt crisis. So Britain spent essentially all of their coffers fighting this war. To recover the cost, the Parliament imposed the famous, obviously what leads to the American Revolution, the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, and the Townshend Act. And this sparked distaste among the colonists. So this also changed colonial identity. Before the war, many colonists saw themselves primarily as British subjects. This war would cause these colonists to gain military confidence. Colonial militias have gained real battlefield experience. Instead of fighting Native American tribes, they fought real professional standing armies. Tensions with Britain and the colonies increased for them being on the front line of the war, and the British Isles were left relatively untouched. And ironically, Britain's victory here helped create conditions for the American Revolution. So the historical importance, as I begin to wrap up this video, so the French and Indian War was one of the most transformative conflicts in early American history because it ended the French supremacy in North America. It expanded British imperial dominance across North America. It intensified the rapid decline of the native people. It created a massive debt for the British, and it helped spark the American Revolution. It also served as a training ground for future leaders in the Revolution, i.e. George Washington, and many historians view the war as the true beginning of the struggle that eventually produced the country we live in today.